Hi, everybody. Welcome to the PC Perspective Podcast. This is the 201st episode, the episode we thought would never happen. Right, guys?
Right.
Didn't think it was going to happen.
Right.
No, it still might not.
The Mayan
we
calendar
could just cut
continues.
off in the middle of it. That's true.
Yeah.
Today is, we're recording this on May 9th, 2012. For those of you who watch the video version, I am in a different studio. This will be my temporary studio for at least a couple of months, maybe 3 months, located in Austin, Texas. It's very luxurious. There are walls, and there is
A guest bed behind you?
curtain. That's actually my bed. There's only one bed in the apartment, so not only is my bed here, but so is all of my testing equipment out here in front of me. So we are back in college dorm spacing, which is totally awesome. But let's see. We got a handful of things to get today. I do want to start off by mentioning a contest that is ongoing, and people who download the podcast or watch on the YouTube video will be able to enter this contest still. This is not one of those where if you're listening to it, it's already too late. If you click through and go to pcpro.com, one of the boxes in our carousel at the top, the article carousel will mention your chance to win a Netgear R6300 802.11ac router. And Alan, if he's not eating still, will be able to explain to us exactly what AC is. 802.11.ac is like, are we talking, this is the first gigabit Ethernet or gigabit wireless technology.
Right. And although I'm not sure
That
if
stands
it's-
for armored cargo, right? Like the AC-130?
No. Yeah, it's basically just faster wireless. It's not business grade. It's definitely use
Sure.
at your own home stuff.
Yeah,
We say that
it's
because
not-
I think some of the comments from that quick news post we had up were talking about it not being business grade. No, this is just a
No, it's still just a consumer product, of course. Now, the contest is easy. All I have to do is fill out a one-question survey, and I think even Josh would be able to
Even
handle
I.
this. Even Josh. And the question is, what
I'm
is the
going to
most
win it. Just stop entering now.
what is the most important factor in determining what type of Wi-Fi technology you use at home? Your options are throughput, range, the maximum number of devices, more reliable connectivity, and energy efficiency. I bet you'll never guess which one of those has had the least answered so far.
Energy efficiency?
yeah.
Yeah, like close to zero. Very close to zero.
It's just a
It
router.
was just that
I mean,
fifth dentist that filled that one in.
It's interesting. So we've had a good amount of entries for that. You don't have to register or anything on the site for it, although we always appreciate it. And we appreciate, we're giving away 3 of them, I think. Yeah. And Netgear and Broadcom are donating these. They're not available yet, so they'll send them to you when they're available. Trust us. What
Speaking
else
of
is
which,
there?
I finally sent out that prize video card to, what's his name, Jack?
John.
Jack Zhang? John Zhang? No.
John Janus? Jack saying, sorry if you're listening, you did not win a video card. John won a video card for our NCAA tournament bracket contest, so we got that out to him. That's nice of you, Josh. We appreciate that.
Anything for you. Almost.
I know. Now, we're going to talk about this for a little bit, but maybe not for that long because we've talked about it in so many different aspects prior to this week. But we recorded the podcast last Wednesday, and Thursday morning, the NDA for the GTX 690 went up. So we actually didn't post our review until 690, although we knew everything about it except the performance. We knew about the cooler. We knew about the price. We knew about the specifications. We basically knew everything there was to know about the 690 except the actual performance. So a quick recap, it is a dual GK104 graphics card, 2 GTX 680s essentially on a single PCB. It is full core count, so we're talking 1536 shaders per GPU, so 3072 shaders on the GPU, 256 total texture units, 64 total ROP units, 256-bit memory bus for each GPU, 2 gigs of memory for each GPU for a total of 4 gigs. And the memory still runs at 6 gigabits per second, 6,000 megahertz, which is a lot of megahertz. The only kind of specification difference between the two is the clock speed, right? The base clock speed of this card is 915 megahertz. The base clock speed of the single GPU card is 1006 megahertz. You're talking about, 95, 90 watt, or not watts, megahertz of performance difference. But the boost clocks are actually much closer. The boost clock on the GTX 690 is 1019 megahertz compared to 1058 megahertz on the GTX 680. So it's compressed there. So in general, if we look at just the boost clocks, we're only talking like a 3 to 4% clock speed difference, typical clock speed. And so we expected, and it lives up to those claims of the GTX 690 really only being 3 to 4% slower than two GTX 680s running an SLI, which is pretty impressive considering how much slower the GTX 590 was than a pair of GTX 580s. So it kind of tells us a little bit about the energy efficiency of the Kepler architecture, the GK104 chip in general. And I think the card has a TDP of 300 watts. It's still a really nice looking card. You can go through the article, look through all of our pictures. The cooler built out of fancy things like trivalent plated aluminum. Yeah.
Chromium.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then mold injected
aluminum.
magnesium alloy. There you go. Yeah, big metals, words, et cetera, et cetera. It's all good. It has the same features as the GTX 680, right?
Does it have Corinthian leather?
Yeah, on the interior.
Rich.
You can access it, but it's there.
Leather.
It's there. It's got GPU boost, frame rate targeting, adaptive VSync, all the same features that we saw on the GTX 680 are on this. Makes sense. It is essentially the same thing. Now, when we start getting into performance, it's where it's really interesting. If you look at, like, say, Battlefield 3 1080p, you go from 72 frames per second on the single card to 125 frames per second on the GTX 690. Comparing the GTX 690 to basically any other video card available, including the GTX 590 and the Radeon HD 6990, which were the previous generation's dual GPU graphics cards, like the highest end graphics cards. It's not even close. The 690 is easily the fastest card out of all of these options. And in our testing, it was very, very close to performance of two GTX 680s, which again we kind of expected. What was kind of interesting here is when we compared the GTX 690 to a pair of Radeon HD 7970 cards in Crossfire. So these are 3 gigabyte 7970s running in Crossfire. The performance was pretty good on those cards. It was still slower than the 690 or the 680s in SLI, which again we kind of expected. But if you look at the power consumption numbers, that's where you kind of see where there might be an issue for AMD down the road when they do finally get their 7990 released. So they have slightly lower performance, not drastically, but slightly lower performance. And when you look at the power consumption numbers, you'll see that the pair of 7970s in Crossfire uses 110, 115 watts more power than the 690, which says that in order for AMD 7990 to be competitive, it would either have to be a heavy or loud, I'm sorry, not heavy, a high power consumption, hot, or very loud. It'd have to have a very fast fan on it to cool that much power in order to keep up with performance. Or what I think is more likely is that you'll see that they are going to pull back performance a little bit and not try to compete directly against the GTX 690. And instead maybe sell theirs for less money. I mean, if they sell their part for $699 or $799, they can undercut the GTX 690 by a couple hundred bucks or more. I think it'll still be a very, very compelling graphics card.
And something that probably should come to light is that AMD apparently has made some changes to their design and the fab, and the stuff that's coming out right now is performing a whole lot better, can go up to higher clock speeds, a little bit better thermals. And this is just them tweaking the 28 nanometer process. And unlike Nvidia, AMD has a lot more chips to bin to be able to hit certain TDPs at clock speeds, and especially with an eye towards these dual GPU boards. And I kind of wonder if they're not going to as you say, offer it a couple $100 less, but actually have them in stock.
Yeah, that would be a new idea. I'd love to see them try and actually bring stock so we could buy these bloody cards.
The funny thing is like, remember we bitched about AMD's stock level on the 7970 when it was first released.
Yeah, it was a paper launch too.
For a couple of weeks, and then all of a sudden they had high availability, and depending on who you ask, Nvidia will say it's because demand slowed dramatically, and the demand is super high, and that's why 680 is still hard to find. We're never going to get a super straight answer from anybody because nobody's going to give me, actual numbers on what their yield rates are or how many cards they've actually sold and that kind of stuff versus the competition. Nobody wants to give out that information, but it'll be interesting to see how that changes. We'll talk about that in a little bit too. I did test 3D Vision surround with the 690, and as you would expect, this card does great for 3D Vision and 3D Vision surround as well. So you can run Battlefield 3 at 5760 by 1080 at the ultra preset at over 30 frames per second, at the high preset over 40 or 50 frames per second. That's pretty impressive. Dirt 3 over almost 40 frames per second, Skyrim over 50 frames, Metro right at about 30. And these are like the highest quality settings, 5760 by 1080. So this card has a lot of power. It's really a nice card. It overclocked. Ours only overclocked decently. We got about 100 megahertz offset. Odd R's didn't really result in a huge performance jump. We already talked about power consumption. And the final issue is, again, on pricing and availability. I saw these for sale on maybe Thursday night or Friday morning from EVGA at Newegg. But since then have really seen nothing on the 590, which is basically exactly what we see on the 580. So if I look up, I'm looking on Newegg now. 680, I'm sorry, you're right. So still on Newegg today, there are no GTX 680s in stock. And on the GTX 690, there are no GTX 690s in stock. And I should point out, when we did see the 690 for sale, it was $1199 instead of $999, which is
$200.
That's a 20% markup.
People paid it.
They did, obviously, because it sold out. I don't blame Nvidia, and I don't blame EVGA necessarily for that. Maybe I should blame both of them, but it's probably a lot of Newegg's fault too. But if they can sell them, who am I to tell them that they're charging too much? That's the way the free market works, I guess.
I bought cars for cheaper than that.
They didn't go as fast though.
I bought cars that are still running right now for cheaper than that.
So it's interesting, right? So the GTX 590, when it launched, I believe was $699, and the HD 6990 was $799. Those are both end of life now, so I really can't price them in any interesting way. But Nvidia still thinks that the GTX 690 is worth $999 because it performs really, really close to the GTX 680. And also, it provides better acoustic properties than two 680s. It only takes up one slot than two 680s, uses a little bit less power than two 680s. So you're getting some advantages. Plus, it's made out of super sexy materials like trivalent chromium plating, right? Yeah. So that's worth at least a couple $100 in my book. I mean, it's a really nice. I guess I've got one sitting here.
Polycarbonate windows. Polycarbonate.
I mean, it's a pretty nice looking video card, right? Like, it's super awesome. But God, $1,000 is a lot of money. Oh, don't forget LED light up there. If you want to see a really interesting demonstration of all this technology and the hardware itself, check out the live review we did with Tom Peterson from Nvidia on launch day. We did a live stream and it's recorded. You can go to youtube.com/PCPer and see it there, or you can go to PCPer.com and search for live review GTX 690 and it'll show up. And he demonstrates the ability to control the light on the top of the GTX 690 and GPU boost features and a bunch of stuff like that. It's actually a really cool demonstration of the technology if you haven't seen it before, even if you're interested in the lower priced Kepler cards that we'll talk about in the future. So also, I will point out on the last page of the story, there is a picture of two GTX 690s running in a quad SLI configuration. If we could bring that up in the video, Burke, if you get a second, there is an SLI bridge connector connecting these two video cards. And apparently they are never going to make this, which is very disappointing because it's actually a really, really slick, perfectly matching piece of hardware. And apparently they've had people who want to make them for them, but they're cost prohibitive to include in anything. I tell you what, if somebody's going to buy two GTX 690s, they'd be willing to spend $50 on this super sexy bridge connector, right? It just seems to make sense.
I think so.
So we'll keep an eye out for that. So that's the 690. I don't know. Do you guys have any other comments or thoughts on it before I move on? Because we talked about it a lot last week as well.
Did I catch you? Did I catch you say something about single slot?
Yeah, it is a single PCI Express slot, but it is it takes up two back plates. Like it takes up it's two slot cooler, but only requires one PCI Express slot. Whereas if you have two 680s, it'll take up two slots, two PCI Express slots, or four backplate slots.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. So no. The idea of a single slot 690 would be impressive, but the issue with single slot really that they're having is in order to get enough display connectors on the cards to support 4 displays, and then also have the ability to exhaust air, exhaust air out the back of the case. So that's the issue they run into with that, even if they could cool it that way.
Well, just actually for water cooling type people, even if you get a water block for one of these, and most water blocks are, they'll bring the card down to a single physical slot, but you can't get away with some of the, change in the back plate like you used to be able to. Right. So for the 680, the standoffs are higher because they stacked them up not the standoffs, but they stacked up the power connectors on the back, on the like towards the back end of the card, but on the front of the card, you have other ports that are going to be in the way. So that's like required to be that dual slot back plate. So you can't get away with, sliding some other card. Some water cooling guys will do that. They'll be able to use that second slot over with, by changing out the back plate to a single slot one. And so, you can't do any of that with any of these from what I can tell, right? Any of the models. Right. Yeah.
Nope. All right. Another quick note here. If you guys go to the site, you'll see that Matt Smith has posted a review of the Asus G75V gaming notebook. This is part of the, I think this is part of the Republic of Gamers series of laptops. This is a Core i7-3720QM Ivy Bridge processor, obviously, and it also includes an Nvidia GTX 670M Kepler graphics card with 3D vision technology built into the display and built into the laptop. 16 gigs of memory, 120 gig SSD, plus a 750 gig hard drive, Blu-ray drive, 17-inch 1080p screen. It is a matte finish, which is nice. Let's see what else we got. 4 USB 3.0 ports, a VGA, an HDMI, a display port, microphone, headphone, and card reader. Plus gigabit Ethernet. That's actually pretty nice. One of the things, I tell you what, I'm using a Alienware M17X as my primary computer currently, both for working here and for the podcast and stuff. And I'll tell you what, I'm surprised. This machine has 5 USB ports on it, and I'm using all 5 of them currently. The microphone, the camera, keyboard and mouse Bluetooth dongle, plus the USB for the powered connector to power this dual link DVI DisplayPort to DVI adapter. So you do need your USB ports, as it turns out. Go ahead.
I wasn't just looking at the pictures of that thing. I was impressed that I think it's the first time we've seen what is it? It's a Chico style keyboard, but it's a full like with a number pen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a big machine. It weighs about 10 pounds, weighs under 10 pounds, but it's a gaming desktop replacement type machine. It's got speakers onto the bottom. It's got cooling out the back. I think it's got really cool styling, the way the display opens up and that kind of stuff. It kind of is reminiscent of some of the Lamborghini branded drives that Asus used to make not too long ago. Battery life is not great, as you would expect. just over 2 hours on the battery eater readers test, which is not great. The problem is apparently 3D. Optimus is not compatible with 3D on Nvidia's parts, so as a result, the laptop spends all of its time with the GTX 670 fully engaged, which absolutely murders the battery life, according to Matt. So you got that. But when you look at performance, it's just out of the park, right? It's got the highest in Ivy Bridge processor, I think, for the mobile platform. So all the benchmarks are great. Gaming performance is great, as you expect, with the Kepler GT670M graphics. Beats out the Alienware M17X that had a 6990 in it, I believe, in most of our tests. So pretty compelling product. What is the price here? That is always the most important part. It got an editor's choice. Let me find the dollar sign here. $1,500, just under $1,500. So it's not a stupid expensive laptop. It's expensive, but I think considering the piece of hardware you get, that's actually not too bad. So if you are looking for a gaming, I know we get questions like this a lot. If you're looking for a gaming notebook, if you're looking for a desktop replacement gaming notebook, check out Matt's review of that. And another article I think you guys should all check out is one that Scott posted this week with the title, "Greater than 20% of malware articles miss the point." And the title doesn't make a huge amount of sense until you actually read the article and see the points he's trying to make. Now, the kind of overview here was that he was making a point about not necessarily that other articles misinterpret malware, but that in general people look at it incorrectly. He left us a couple of notes here. He says that con artists and scammers want their victims to be complacent because a victim who knows they're being scammed is less likely to be scammed. Obviously, malware is a tool that makes that easy and lucrative. It's just a tool, however, users need to realize that. And he brings up the FTC suit going against, what was that, Ecometrics? Was that the name of the company that had the malware installation issue? I think that's what it was. He mentions it in the story. He says they took advantage of your complacency with your fear for your children to scam you and your family, right? So it's just an interesting editorial that looks at malware, the kind of the psychology behind it, why it works. I've been caught in malware before, where we've had running let's say a laptop that doesn't have any kind of firewall or antivirus installed, because maybe it was a test machine at one point, and those very convincing pop-ups that look like security essentials and stuff like that show up. And if I have to, I know that if I'm sitting there staring at it going, I might need to Google this to see what's going on, that I know that my wife or my mom or my sister or my dad or whatever is going to go, oh yeah, that looks legit, and click whatever it is that they're supposed to click to get that malware installed. So I know Josh and Jeremy deal with this kind of on a daily basis with end users, and Alan does we'll say deals with it in his full-time job as well.
Intimately deals with it.
So it's
at the assembly level, intimately.
It's a very interesting editorial, and I would go ahead and point you guys to go read that to get a little bit of technology information. It's not strictly hardware. Now, we're going to take a break here real quick because I'm not 100% sure if we're going to have an advertisement in today's podcast. I think we are. I think we're going to. So if I immediately start talking again after this sentence and this statement, then we didn't have an ad. And if not, let's thank today's podcast sponsor. I don't know, so just have it. All right. Well, thank you for that, or not. I'm not exactly sure. Let's go through some news items here. Josh, you want to talk to us a little bit about some of the additional rumors about Trinity improvements that may or may not be coming with this processor, likely very soon, since we saw some releases from HP and that kind of stuff today?
Yeah, XPrayView, they posted all of the slides, and they look pretty legit. They covered a lot of things that we have kind of, excuse me, known before, but just kind of, puts it all in concrete terms. There are a lot of advancements in the Bulldozer core to make it pile driver, to make it a lot better. Now, they're saying that there should be, an overall 25% increase in performance. They don't really explain that metric. They do say that graphics are going to be about a 50% increase. And from some leaked benchmarks, we see that Trinity running at 3.8 gigahertz is about 28% faster than the previous Llano clocked at 2.9 gigahertz. Now, you'd think that with almost 1 gigahertz of speed in there, that there would be a little bit faster performance, but that's kind of just what you get with Bulldozer.
Yeah.
They've improved overall efficiency of the chip. It's, I think, OpenCL to 1. Excuse me, I got a cough. 1.2 performance. 1.2 compatibility. Good Lord, I'm having a hard time.
Yeah, just sketched himself with the cough just now.
Say that again.
He had just sketched himself with the cough just now. Sorry, folks.
Yes. Yeah. So anyway, there's not a whole lot that we don't know. It's true. I think the desktop supports up to 1866 memory. The laptops have a max speed of 1600. For that, HP again has shown off its Sleekbook that is powered by
yeah.
Yeah, and it's not exactly an Ultrabook because it's got a spinning hard drive and it's a little bit thicker, but that's going to be retailing for about $599, which is a pretty good deal when you consider everything that you get and pretty good integrated graphics. That will be a step above not just Llano, but also the latest Ivy Bridge products out from Intel. So they're going to eventually go into more detail about all the little tweaks that they've done. I think they increased the size of the L1 TLBs. They've really worked on prefetch. They've decreased the latencies to the caches. A lot of these things that we had discussed earlier and kind of thought about, and it seems like they've actually done this, and they've really improved the design, and I think that it will be a lot better than what we have seen previously with Bulldozer. Maybe not so much in performance per clock, but definitely in power efficiency. So we're going to start hearing about those here pretty quickly. It's the 9th today, huh?
Yeah, today is the 9th. Are you alluding to something?
Nope, not at all.
All right. Let's it seems like we talked about Nvidia's GPUs a lot recently. Let's talk with Jeremy. Apparently I think we mentioned it last week, the possibility of some rumors, maybe some leaks talking about a new GTX 670. What is the kind of newest information out on those leaks?
Well, I mean, the big problem is that it's for sale in Asia. So if you look around, you can actually find straight out reviews of this card. It does exist. But what we have seen is an MSI graphics card with proper spelling on the front this time. Last week, a little depressed by the spelling mistake on that. And we're looking at, it's about, going to be about the same size as the 680. It's going to be slightly slower. It's going to have 192 less CUDA cores, so only 1344 total, and slightly slower than the 680, so it's going to be at 900 megahertz. But you're still looking at the same 256-bit memory interface, which is really nice because sometimes NVIDIA makes us feel that we just don't quite have enough memory on our cards. Again, you're looking at a slightly reduced clock speed on your memory, down to 5 gigahertz. But because of the fact that it is scaled back, the leaks are pegging this at a TDP of about 150 watts, which is going to make it significantly less power hungry and heat creating than any of AMD's products right now. And if the rumors are right, it'll be selling for about $350 to $380, which makes it an even more attractive choice than the 7950. And from what we've been hearing about the performance, that's not actually the card it's competing against. There's enough difference between the 680 and the 7970 that NVIDIA can pretty much peg a card to two cards to go against the 6970, and hope the 6990 can sort of match the 680, and then they can pull out the 690 and just laugh. It's going to be very interesting, and hopefully we start seeing these cards for sale soon.
Like actually in stock, you mean?
Yeah. Because, I mean,
Wouldn't
it's
that be
nice to tell us
nice?
that we could buy it in theory if we were looking at Amazon or Newegg or whatever online retailer you like at that exact moment with your finger just pushed for buy me. Unfortunately, that's the way it's going. Hopefully that's going to change in the near future because this is not the first time that we've seen very low availability from a GPU when it first hits the market. In fact, you might as well get used to it, I think.
It seems to be the curse of the 28 nanometer process from TSMC. I'm not going to blame them for everything, but I'll go ahead and blame them for a lot of it.
I'm not going to blame them.
You're not?
I think this is a design issue from Nvidia. I think it's a
That's the
low-level
worry.
thing that's causing them a lot of issues. I don't mean to go all Charlie D on it, but the other two major manufacturers using 28 nanometers, namely AMD and Qualcomm, all they say is that, we just don't get enough wafer starts. We want to fulfill the demand. Yields are good, but we just don't have enough wafer starts. NVIDIA's saying, well, we don't have enough wafer starts, and and we still can't get them out into
But they're
public.
selling so fast.
Oh, they are selling so fast.
Oh,
So
I
fast.
think that there was less than 1,000. I know that they've shipped less than 10,000 GTX 680s, or at least I've heard that there were less than 1,000 GTX 690s all over the world that so far have been shipped, and even that number is iffy. And so when
Yeah.
you look at AMD, when they released their first batch of 7970s, there were 10,000 on the market. Shortly after the launch, they dropped another 10,000, and by 2 weeks after their launch, you could pick them up anywhere. Another month and a half after that, we started to see the really interesting, unique designs from MSI, Asus, Gigabyte, and whoever. And we have not gotten to the point so far with Nvidia, and we're month and a half from launch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I just don't buy the TSMC. Their 28 nanometer process is holding them back, because I honestly just don't think that that's the problem.
So in other news, something interesting that came up is somebody pointed me to a thread where Diablo 3, in the official Diablo 3 forums, apparently, there was a note from a moderator that said essentially, if you're using ATI's Catalyst 12.4 release, you need to revert to an earlier version. 12.4 isn't going to be supported for use in Diablo 3. And this created a big uprising from gamers that
Firestorm.
they like to update their drivers, right? There are improvements in other games, and Blizzard needs to understand that there are other titles that exist and that kind of stuff. So they can't just advertently just decide that this driver is not going to be supported, the latest one. So as it turns out, going back and forth, we actually had somebody from AMD actually contact us, and they said in a tweet, "This post from Blizzard is an unfortunate misunderstanding we are working to correct. 12.4 works fine for 5K, 6K, and 7K users. So if you have a Radeon 5000, 6000, or 7000 card, this bug does not affect you. The 12.4 bug with Diablo 3 affects HD 2000, 3000, and 4000 users. So if you have one of those cards still, you would have to revert to 12.3 or 12.2. But they're still hoping to have it fixed by the time Diablo is released in 6 days, according to my watch. And then actually, Robert, the same guy who sent me the tweet, actually posted in our comments about it and gave us a full update that it was actually 2400, 2600, 2900 cards, 3400, 3600, and 4500 graphics cards under Windows Vista and Windows 7. So that's a very specific subset of graphics there. So,
well, aren't those the same ones that they just announced they're not really going to be supporting on the mainline Catalyst anymore and just producing quarterly drivers?
yes, but I don't know what driver version that started with.
Apparently 12.4.
But that was but the difference there is that it would be all of the 2000, 3000, and 4000. And this is very specific ones. Like only the 4500 is affected by it, not the 4800 cards, for example. So And if you run Windows XP still, you're not affected either. So if you heard that news from us or somebody else earlier, know that it may be not affecting you in the way that you thought it was going to if you are running any kind of latest 3 generations of graphics cards. Other little small updates. Corsair launched. They continue to get into new product lines, and they launches Air series of high airflow and high static pressure fans. So AF, they got 120 millimeter.
I like this a lot, actually. This is a really, really good idea.
Why is that?
Especially for anybody that's okay. So you have a water cooling system, right? You have fans that you need a high static pressure for the ones that are sitting right up against the cooler, for example, like air exhaust out of the cooler. And then you have your regular case fans that don't have anything on either side of them. They're just sitting on the threshold of the the back of the case, for example. And you just want those to move a lot of air, like over the motherboard or whatnot. So that's perfect. You're just they're tailoring the fans to those specific cases. And there's like, what is it, 5 different? Let's see. There's like 4 different 120 millimeter models. So there's like, low noise, good airflow, high airflow, low noise, high pressure, just high pressure. So there's there's different ratings. They give you CFMs for all of them. They give you noise for all of them, RPM for all of them. So you can just it's tailored to your cooling system. This is cooling on a PC case is the kind of thing where if you think it out properly before you do it, then you pretty much don't have to mess with it anymore, right?
Right.
So this just gives you the right options to be able to choose instead of the only way to do it before was you would just have to figure out which company was making a fan that people had already looked at that thought that it was good for this kind of a thing, whatever it might have been. So you'd get guys, they would use like one brand for the fans right up against the radiator. They use some other brand for the across both the case. So this is good that they have these kinds of things.
Cool.
It looks like they're all 120 millimeter except for one model that's 140. So I'd like to see more models from them, but it's good that they have what they have. 120 is pretty much a standard for this anyway. So yeah, they got it covered.
Another interesting kind of announcement is that Steam will soon allow remote installation of games, or they might already if you enable the beta participation in your version of Steam. This basically would allow you to install, if you are out and about, install a game on your computer while you're not there, right? So you can say, yes, please install. It's very similar to like if you go to android.google.com, or I'm sorry, market.android.com, and you log into your account there, and you can buy an application, or you can get an application and have it basically push install the application to your phone. It's actually a really, really cool feature that Android has had for a while. And Steam is bringing it to the PC. So in theory, I'm hoping that you can buy a game if you're out. Maybe let's say you're at a crappy game store like GameStop or something like that, and you see that a new game was released for the PC. You go, look on you've got the Steam app on your Android phone or on your iPhone, and you can buy it and tell it to install it on that PC. And if your PC is on and connected to the network, it will begin the download and installation process, which I think is really cool. It's not going to, it can save you a little bit of time. It's not earth-shattering news, but I think it's just one of those things that, things are catching up to the PC game is catching up to the rest of technology in the mobile world and all that kind of stuff. So I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah, because it's so frustrating that there's no other way to remotely connect to a desktop.
But this is way easier.
I've been installing games remotely for years.
But you don't have to have VP. You don't have to have a VNC server installed. You don't have to pay for log me in. You don't have to install any other application. It's just kind of all automatic.
RDC.
Yeah. You don't have to do any of that. It's just interesting. It's just cool to do, be able to have this flexibility. OCZ Vertex 4 1.4 release candidate updates. There's been a lot of kind of back and forth on this. Alan, do you want to explain to us kind of what happened here and what the benefits of this new firmware is going to be for users of the Vertex 4 drive?
So I've been looking at this for a couple of days now. This is the 1.4 release candidate, which OCZ publicly released. Not a typical thing for an SSD firmware, but if you recall when this drive first came out, there were actually most of the other reviewers just reviewed it with what came on it. But I wasn't too happy with what I saw from the performance, so I got them to slip me one of the early betas of what they were working on for that update, which we included with the original review. And this update is actually, it's pretty close, except for one big difference. It's pretty close to the updated firmware, like the second firmware that we had in the original post. The difference, though, with this release candidate is the write speeds are significantly higher. Like to the point where if you compare the 128 gig versus the 256 gig models, the 128 gig is only writing like 50 meg per second less than the 256. So it's almost like the 128 is just, the specs are pretty darn good. I mean, it's like almost 400 meg per second writes on the 128, where it formerly was 200 meg per second writes. So it's good to see that they just basically opened it up. I think from the way the benches look on it, it looks like it was limiting it almost artificially before, and it's almost like they just got rid of it. Now it's just going full speed to the flash, from what I could tell. And there were some other performance, I don't want to say improvements because it's like they gain a little in one place, but they trade off a little bit in other places. The thing I'm not very impressed with, which actually carries across the whole, the initial firmware and even the updates where they're at right now, is anything less than a 4 kilobyte read, 4 kilobyte sized read is almost an order of magnitude slower than 4K and up. So what I'm talking about is random IOs 4K. So your random write 4K is very impressive from the drive, but the random read below 4K is really like almost abysmal. It's probably the lowest I've seen on an SSD, actually. And some people argue, well, NTFS, like on a typical partition, the cluster size is 4K, so you're typically not going to do it smaller than 4K. Contrary to that, Windows does a lot of small reads that are less than 4K if some things like web browsing workloads, like where you have a browser that has like a Internet Explorer, the actual file on the partition is almost like a mini database file, just so that you don't have Windows trying to save thousands and hundreds of thousands of small files to the drive and just really cluttering it up. But when it goes to access that file, it does it smaller than 4K. So you could have, your browser's trying to pull a bunch of images that were cached off of the drive. You'd actually see it, this would almost be noticeably small, like slower for that kind of thing compared to, almost any other SSD. So there's just, it's sort of like they just didn't want to mess with, it's almost like they just didn't pay attention to stuff that was less than 4K for some reason. Like didn't want to optimize for it to the point where it was almost detrimental to the drive. Now, I had the same comment about the 910 series when I talked about that. However, the 910 series, or the Intel 910 series, is not meant to be any consumer anything, right? It's meant to be database, things with 4K or 8K kind of block reads, where it's just it just uses a data store. It's designed to do nothing but that. That's okay. So I was kind of surprised to see this from this firmware. However, big caveat, hey, look, it's just a release candidate. You don't have to upgrade to it if you have a Vertex 4. I would personally just hold out. If you're satisfied with the performance and you're not necessarily needing that extra 10, 20, 30%, right? Even if you bought the 128 gig model, right now you have 200 meg per second writes. So you're probably not coming up with data at a greater rate than 200 meg per second that you're going to need to put on this thing.
Now, somebody in the chat room is saying, the Vertex 4 firmware 1.4 or the Samsung 8. They said 820. I assume they mean 830. So they're asking as a question. They were about to buy an 830, but the new firmware for the Vertex 4 has maybe put a spanner in the works. They say so. As it looks right now?
As it looks right now, given the choice, me personally, given the choice between either one of those, I would go with the 830.
Okay.
It's just the Vertex 4.
Is that at similar prices or?
They should be similar prices. Yeah, they should be on price parity with each other, just cost per gig. I really can't comfortably go with Vertex 4 yet because it's like it's not done still, right? And not only that, but this release candidate firmware is a destructive update. So if you wanted to update to it, you'd have to back your whole OS off, off of it, do the update, and nothing's to say that when they do release the final version of the firmware, it's not going to be the same case. So, I mean, if you're the kind of power user that really wants to, enthusiast kind of person that just likes to tinker and update the firmware repeatedly on the device that's holding all of your data while you're trying to use your computer,
Right.
live on the wild side, go for it. But if you just want to use the thing and have good performance, then get, an 830. I would go with the 830. And there have been some pretty darn good sales, actually. Tim had posted something where they were. Oh wait, no, that was the M4. That was the Crucial M4, which is also a decent drive, by the way. Yeah, that's actually another interesting point. Is that if you remember, we had a news post from a little while back where it was sort of broke that I think it was a NAND that broke it initially. That what the controller actually is in those is Marvell, right? So it's interesting to see the firmware so radically different between the performance so radically different between Vertex 4 versus all of the other Marvell-based solutions. And on top of that, the other Marvell drives that are out there, they haven't changed. They don't see these wild, they're not in so much flux with their performance as the firmwares get updated. So, yeah, this is just, my take is just sit on the sidelines on the Vertex 4. If you absolutely want to have like a OCZ product, then just hold off for a little while. Let them figure that out and then get one.
It's fair. It's fair. Another kind of maybe turn for the worst piece of news is Windows Media Center may be a pro-only feature, and it may be a pay-for upgrade feature with Windows 8 when it comes out. So apparently, Windows Media Center, that is admittedly doesn't have a huge following, but it's got a strong and vocal following at the very least. They're saying that Media Center will be not a default part of Windows 8, but instead will be it'll be included in the, what do they call it now? Add features to Windows 8 control panel option, what was previously known as the Windows Anytime Upgrade option in previous versions of Windows. So you'll have to pay to get the Media Center add-on for Windows 8, which, that's kind of crappy because it's something we've been used to getting for free for a little while, at least with Vista and with Windows 7. But it looks like in this case with pay for it, but what may be more disappointing, and hopefully something will change before the release, is that Media Center Pack will only be available with the Pro version of Windows 8, leaving home users out of luck, because Windows 8 Pro is essentially the ultimate edition of previous versions of Windows, right? So it's definitely going to cost more than the home version of Windows 8. And it seems kind of dumb that the home user, the person who would be most likely interested in using Media Center, would not be able to pay to upgrade that. So I'm hoping that's either miscommunication or something that we get enough end user feedback that they're gonna change it and at least offer it as an upgrade, if not include it for free in all the versions of Windows 8. Yeah, somebody's in the chat room saying that there's no DVD playback in Windows 8. That's true. We talked about that last week. And there could be a lot of different issues that crop up with Windows 8 in terms of Media Center, playback, all that kind of stuff. So, if codecs are being pulled from the operating system as well, as they're saying in the chat room, then it's also possible that part of that upgrade fee that you're paying will go to pay for those licenses so you can play MPEG content and all that kind of stuff, and H.264 and any of the issues that might arise from that. So it's still in flux, but it's an interesting little story that Tim posted about the status of Windows Media Center and Windows 8. Which you guys should check out if you are still interested in that. Now, Jeremy, we've talked about Nvidia, TSMC, some interesting stuff there. Now, there was a news post you put up today, actually, that might be some good news from those pair of companies.
The soap opera continues. It's the story that won't stop giving to us. The TSMC 28 nanometer and Nvidia. So essentially, we heard from Digitimes today that TSMC is looking at giving priority to Nvidia on their production lines. As we've already touched on, TSMC has some other customers on those production lines which aren't having any problems whatsoever. So it's more a matter of, are they going to be cutting back on Qualcomm and AMD's ability, who are already complaining that they're not getting enough capacity in order to give Nvidia some more capacity? I think this is more of a move by TSMC because, as Josh alluded to earlier, there's a chance that there's something wrong with the design. And so if Nvidia is going to be going back to the masks and, redesigning the chip, there's no reason that they couldn't redesign it for another production company like Samsung or GlobalFoundries. Because at that point, if they got to redo it, why not switch to TSMC's gate last? But why not switch to the other, to gate first, and just bail on TSMC, who were probably planning on using Nvidia to provide a lot of their sales for this coming year because, big launch that they've got, which they're having trouble dealing with. So if TSMC throws them more production capability, sure, they have to toss out a lot more wafers, but there's a lot more wafers there to start with. So maybe we'll start seeing a bit more of a supply of the 680s and 690s that we would love to buy if only we could find.
It's possible. That's just a process that's going to take a lot of time, right? So obviously they would rather, the easiest, the quickest solution is to get more allocation from TSMC. The long-term solution may be to look at dual foundries again, but that creates a lot of additional work for the company. Yeah. I don't know if, Josh, if you are awake enough, not sick enough to make any comment on something like this.
I am awake enough. This comes at the time where TSMC is really starting to expand their 28 nanometer production. So they are offering more and more wafers available, and I'm not sure if Qualcomm and AMD will be squeezed out so much as AMD will. Nvidia will get more of those new wafer starts that as they're ramping up production, and I kind of wonder if some of the specialized FPGA guys are going to get pushed out a little bit and not get as much as many wafer starts. So yeah, it's good news for Nvidia, but we're going to be very curious what the real reason for all of the issues that they're having comes out.
Agreed. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's going to round out our news for this week. We're going to get into our hardware and software picks of the week. So Josh can go take some NyQuil and go to bed, I guess.
Yeah.
So my pick for this week, I don't think we've picked it before, but I actually have had some hands-on time with it. Now, this is the Asus RT-N66U dual band router, and I almost picked this solely because of its kick-ass name. Its code name, its name on the box, actually, and a small portion of it is the Dark Knight. So if you want a kick-ass, just sweet as hell router called the Dark Knight, you definitely need to pick up this N66U. It's a dual band 5 gigahertz, 2.4 gigahertz ABGN router. It's what I've been most impressed with. We're using it as our primary router here in the Austin apartment, and we're going to use it for some benchmarks and some reviews of some other routers here in the coming weeks. Is that they completely revamped the software side of it. When you log into the router, it's not your typical boring looking frames. It's actually using frames on the left for your menu and whatever on the right, standard websites. It's actually very intuitively designed. There's a lot of interesting features that we've never seen in here before. It supports features like file sharing, printer sharing. It even supports 3G sharing through the USB ports. It does some actually pretty cool stuff there. Asus WRT for easy setup, signal monitoring, network application control. It has 3 detachable high-powered antennas, and it gives you directions on how to point them to create for its location in the house, to get the best reliability out of that. It is, of course, has gigabit. It is dual band connectivity. And if you have the appropriate devices, the other N900 series of devices from Asus, you can get 450 megabits per second through each device as well. So actually up to 900, I think, on some of them. So it's interesting, good stuff. We're going to have full reviews up of it here the not too distant future looking at it. And it's just the software side of it is just as impressive as the hardware side of it. And so we're looking forward to using it and then kind of taking it apart to see what's inside and making it tick. It is a $180 router. It's not a cheap router. Dual band, high-end dual band routers tend to be about this price range. Just might be a little bit on the higher side, but so far have had no issues with it, no problems with it in our actual use cases of it. So that is my pick, and we'll have more on it very soon. Jeremy?
Well, if you really like waving your hands around like an idiot playing Wii or Kinect, Microsoft Labs has just put out a fancy little thing called Soundwave, which you'll be able to do for free. It essentially uses Doppler radar from the built-in microphone and speakers on.
It's not
your
radar
equipment.
then, but
Well,
it is the Doppler effect.
sonar. Sorry, Doppler sonar. Thank you.
Near,
See, you're still
far.
awake.
Near, far.
Near, far. Near, far. But the nice thing is it's using existing technology. You're not looking at going out and buying anything, although if you want a higher resolution, you're probably going to have to pick up multiple microphones or more speakers. But the fun thing is, even in a noisy environment, even if you're listening to music, it's still going to work. So maybe not so much as an input peripheral, but they show a nice little part of it where essentially as you walk towards a laptop, it unlocks itself and lets you work on it. As you walk away, it immediately locks itself again. Sort of interesting. There it is right there.
Really embarrassing with depending on the gestures and what time of night it is.
Well, that'd be the other fun of this thing. But it does kind of highlight sort of. I like the idea that there's a new way of interacting with your computer, but watching the guy waving his hand above a perfectly good keyboard sort of illustrates that maybe this is not the way we need to go. On the other
think
hand,
of the exercise you'll get.
Yes.
You do like
PC
Madonna
fit.
Vogue stuff.
I'm making it bigger. I'm making it smaller. I'm making it bigger.
I pinch your head.
And I'm sure you can play Angry Birds with it too. Boing.
Nice.
Josh?
Who's up next? Josh?
Me.
Yeah, there we go.
All right. Well, I think Ken posted this in our little private chat some days back,
private.
and it's a yes. Ken likes to Miami secretly
I bet he
whisper
does.
sweet nothings in my ear, or at least text me. But that's Ken, and I just I have nothing against him. I'll just let him do that. But anyway, we have quite a few really nice cases out there, like the Corsair 650D that I talked about last week, that do not have the USB 3.0 internal header. Instead, you have to get the cables through the case and out the back, and then plug them into the back of the motherboard. And if you've got, say, like the Asus Crosshair 5, then a lot of the AM3 boards and now the Z77 boards, they have the USB 3.0 header on the motherboard itself. I mean, it's just, like a 19-pin device, and you certainly can't plug any of the regular cables in there. So to do that, Silverstone has a nice little $12 deal that you can plug into that unused USB 3.0 header and then plug in the regular USB 3.0 cables into, and this takes care of a lot of the higher-end cases that have not been refreshed yet that have this standalone USB 3.0 motherboard header. So for $13, I think it's worth it to make the cabling inside your computer so much nicer, and you still have access to the rear USB 3.0 ports.
Very cool. Alan, last on our list.
So back in 2005, speaking of your expensive router there, Ryan. This is
Back when
expensive, but not a router.
dinosaurs roamed the earth.
So back in 2005, I bought this.
It only
guy.
has a 1 GB.
Yeah.
He likes the bigger GBs.
But it was like $140. So this is it's like only a 1 inch long. It's a PQI makes it. It was one of their earliest really thin USB.
Just one thin little waffle.
Yeah, it's basically it's a jump drive that just plugged in, and it's only the thickness of like the bottom half of the USB port. Anyhow, so that was not even. This was the PQI Intelligence Stick 2.0, but it was not USB 2.0, just for the record. That wasn't even like really caught on yet. Anyhow, fast forward to now.
Mm-hmm.
Now they have a really tiny, actually even smaller, not thinner, not as thin, but smaller in the other dimensions, 32 gig USB 3.
Why is it still in the package?
I just stuck it back in so it was easy to hold up for the podcast thingy.
Oh, I see. I can't see how thin it is.
Well, I'm fixing that right now. So here we go. There we go.
It's chubby.
Pretty. It's yeah. It's a little chubby, but it's pretty darn small. It has the full port on it, right? But basically, this thing is similar to like a Bluetooth dongle that you plug into your laptop, right? One of those little stubby Bluetooth dongle things, maybe a little bit longer than that. I did, however, take the liberty of running something for the people looking on the stream. And, yeah, performs pretty well. Does about 80 meg per second.
I was going to say, could you read off some of those numbers for our audio listeners?
Does about 80 meg per second on the reads and a little over 20 meg per second on the writes from the benchmark that I'm holding up for the folks.
That's pretty good.
That's pretty good for a really, really tiny, and it's tiny. Like here, actually, to show.
It's really good for a tiny anything, Alan.
To show an example, here we go. This is, that's it. It's plugged in.
So small.
Oh. It's got a nice blinky light.
Blinky.
Yeah, really. It's not focusing on it for some reason, but whatever.
It's too small. It can't see it.
Yeah. It's a pretty good match for an Ultrabook. That's the thing, actually. They're out. They're not on sale yet. I guess they're still trying to get them to distributors, and I haven't found pricing anywhere. But it's probably going to be
$400.
And how
it's
did
probably
you get
going to be cheaper than like the $150 that I spent on, that other guy 7 years ago or so.
Man, if you'd saved that $150 and invested it in Apple stock 7 years ago,
I would have. Yeah, right. I know. Don't remind me. I would have. I wouldn't have that. I would have I could have just bought one of these. Bought a freaking Ultrabook.
Stock
would have been five times that. Oh well. Hindsight.
Indeed. That's going to do it for this week's episode of the show. PCPro.com/podcast is the URL where you should go get it. Again, download it as many times as you want. I won't even complain. But tell your friends about it if you hang out in some tech communities that don't listen to our podcast. Tell them about how witty and humorous we are, and how Josh sniffs all the time and Jeremy smokes. And
call me a mouth or something.
Alan shows off his Ultrabook, and I sit here and try to run the show. What could be more interesting than that on a weekly basis, right? If you want to find us in other ways, you can go to twitter.com/PCPer, facebook.com/PCPer, youtube.com/PCPer, PCPer.com/PCPer. No, just PCPer.com. That'll work too. So that'll be it. Next week, we will have more graphics cards to talk about. We'll have other topics to discuss. And I will actually be attending the NVIDIA GPU Technology Conference for part of next week as well. So it should be an interesting week of news coming up. So with that, I'm Ryan Shrout.
I'm Jeremy Hellstrom.
I'm Josh Walrath.
And I'm Alan Malventano.
Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you next week.